Welcome to Virtuous Society. I'm your host, Itamar, where we explore the art of Web3 gaming, community building, and much more. Today, I'm excited to welcome Kem, CEO and founder of Pixion Games, the force behind Fableborn. With 15 plus years in mobile gaming, Kem has helped create games with millions of downloads and nine-figure revenues. The Fableborn team is known for their high standards. They choose not to raise funds during the last cycle, even though they could have taken a huge payday, and killed 5 games during that time before finally launching Fableborn. I want to give a huge thanks for Cam for his time and for his insights. Enjoy the episode. Hello, Cam. Thank you for being here. How are you?
Hey, yeah, good to be here. Appreciate you having me on the podcast.
Appreciate you taking the time and being here. We're very excited to have you. And I want to straight away dive into it and ask you first and foremost, what is Fableborn and why is it important in the current gaming landscape?
Yeah, sure. So if we boil it down, Fableborn at its core product is a mobile multiplayer game, blending action RPG meets strategy base building. So the game in itself is really easy pickup to play, really accessible, but has a lot of mastery, and so months and years of playtime. As a core product, that's obviously what we can distill it down to, but probably what you mentioned earlier, why is this important? Why is this our North Star? Why are we really excited about what we're building? So we come from a background, the entire studio come from a traditional Web2 background, and we've been building and scaling games that have reached tens of millions of DAU, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And then when we think about gaming and where it's going, we really started to lose a lot of faith in traditional Web2.
Interesting
One, in
word.
the business model itself, unit economics really weren't making sense. And so why is this important when it comes to a core product? And I'll explain that. So the business model wasn't really making sense because CPIs were starting to grow. Post IDFA, it became a lot less efficient to market and find your quality players. So LTVs were also reducing, retention was reducing. And so what that meant is that your payback cycles, i.e. your route to profitability, instead of being maybe 60, 90, 120 days, were 365 plus days. And so you weren't looking at weeks or months before every dollar became a profitable dollar. You were looking at years. And that's just not a sustainable business. What that meant is smaller studios, and those studios that really, can take risks, can experiment, can innovate, and therefore bring those new, familiar but fresh or really exciting new core games to the market. They just couldn't get to the market. A good game would, really be killed because they didn't have the war chest to be able to spend tens of millions of dollars a year
Yeah, and
while being
survive.
unprofitable.
Yeah.
Right? And so you either needed to raise 30, 40, 50 million, which in today's market and landscape is really difficult, regardless of your pedigree. Or you had to build a business with the goal of being viral. And, that's not a very strong business strategy in my mind. And so what does this boil down to? Essentially, the larger teams that have tried and tested core loops, core games, products, they're not going to innovate because it's really risky. The smaller teams were being priced out of the market. And so what that meant for gaming as a whole, certainly now on mobile, is the same type of games we're releasing on the store. They're almost reskins of previous successes of those studios. And now we've seen this, real, I guess, monumental moment for indies on PC. But that's where PC gaming was probably 6-7 years ago. There's a real high barrier to entry. AAA budgets were just growing. There's no platform or route for indies to really scale and succeed. And now we're starting to see Steam become much more of a discovery platform. It was always a discovery platform, but they're really pushing and providing indies and smaller studios with the spotlight. and you're seeing, some major hits. The last one was Wukong. It was a small team that bet big on themselves, and now
Yeah,
it's one
and
of the
went crazy viral.
fastest growing titles in the world. And I think mobile needs that moment now. And to be able to do that, obviously businesses have to be profitable. They have to be able to survive. They have to have the assurances that they can create scalable businesses, and that's why Fairborn is and Web3 gaming, is important for what's about to come. There's a paradigm shift happening, and we're really excited to be at the forefront of that with Fairborn.
Amazing, and I'm really excited to have the conversation that we're going to have, because the first time that I've heard about you guys, the studio and the game itself, was from the Game 7 community, without the game even being like, nothing was really out. It was just simply the team and the vision, like just kind of the last 2 minutes of what you just brought up with the pedigree, obviously, of the team was enough to get a lot of people excited about whatever it is that you're going to make, just because the why is so strong there, and you understand the market. I think the team specifically, not necessarily just you, but obviously you, in a way that's going to be pretty helpful for the space to move forward. Now, I think one thing that I want to unpack a little bit more, just so we can dive deeper into it and understand the issue better. You said that small indie studios have to raise 40, 50 million just to pretty much bring the game to market. Can you dive a bit deeper into how that's actually being played out? Like, why is that the case?
Yeah, it's really, and I'll be really focused on mobile, right? Because I can talk about PC and console, but to less of a degree. And so our sweet spot is certainly mobile. It's where we spent, like I say, a decade or more. And so marketing and user acquisition has always been, the other side of a coin when it comes to being able to scale and succeed. On one hand, you needed a really great game, a great product that would retain players. It was sticky. Players want to come back. They play more. They'd share with their friends. They'd spend, particularly in free to play. You have to create a game that players feel, whatever their motivation, whether they want to compete, flex with skins, climb up the leaderboard, whatever it may be, there has to be a motivation that's triggered that then makes them say, I'm going to put some dollars into this game. And there has to be enough of those players that say that and come to that conclusion, right? And so the other side is, well, how do we reach that critical mass? Because like any economic model, you're not going to convert your entire audience. And in mobile Web2 gaming, you'd be really lucky if you converted, 5%.
Yeah.
And so top funnel, you're having to acquire a huge amount of players that will never ever spend in the or with the goal to really find that 5% or less that are going to say, I'm going to spend, and I'm going to spend so much that it accounts for and returns all the budget
Those are
and the
the
cost of a
whales.
studio. Yeah, whales, etc. And so studios are spending a lot of capital on platforms like Facebook, Google, etc. These ad platforms, and acquiring a lot of players, millions and millions of players, to be able to distill that down to tens of thousands of players that are spending every week, every month.
Interesting.
And so you need to get to that critical mass. For example, if we only acquired 1,000 players, that's 50 players, that are actually spending. It's obviously not enough. And likewise, so you can see how that scales. It's not tens of thousands of players you need; it's millions. Obviously, also depends on the type of team. If you're a one-man band and actually, your only costs are you,
Yeah.
then that also scales down. You actually maybe could survive with, maybe 2, 3, 4,000 players. But given that we're a venture-backed studio, we've raised several $1 million. We have a background of building games that are in the top 100 apps. That's again the scale that we want to achieve, and to do that generally requires a larger team. You're looking at specialists in some areas. But then we're also creating, a slightly more complex game, and so that increases budgets just on the production side. But really, where you spend a lot of your capital now is on marketing, and so those marketing dollars are just not as efficient
As they
as
were
they
before.
were
Yeah.
4 years ago. And so now you're spending not only a lot more capital, but the capital is less efficient. And so, like I say earlier on, your payback cycles are just not as short as they used to be. And so you need a lot more runway. Even if you've got a very successful game, that successful game is not paying you back in the first
Like
few months.
years and
In
months.
most cases, yeah, it's years, like I say. And so you need to be able to have that capital outlay, knowing that you're onto a winner, but able to still be negative in terms of cash flow for
For a while.
a really sustainable amount of time.
Interesting. That's a lot of insight. Okay, interesting. Uh, for your role as a CEO of Fableborn, how does that shape the direction? Like, first and foremost, like how is your day to day looks like, and what is your role in kind of steering the ship?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, we have a really strong team, and so although there's a lot that I do, the team is what drives us forward as a collective. The important parts from my side is I believe every team in every business in any sector, fundamentally they're a recruitment business. You know, at its core, you have to find and retain the best people. And so, how do we do that with the resources we have, with the talent that we need, the objectives and goals that we have? And so, I spend a lot of time, even now with other smart minds around me, but when we were just a six-person team, that a lot of that responsibility fell on me. And so, how do we optimize that funnel? How do we become attractive when we're not paying the same salaries as someone like a King or a Supercell potentially at that time? How do we still attract talent? How do we retain them? And so recruitment's a big part of my role. And even now, looking at the talent that we have now and all the incredible team members that we have now, are there any gaps? And then secondly, having a very clear North Star. And in Web3, I think that's, sometimes very difficult for teams and founders because there's always new trends, always
Yeah.
new opportunities. And so you could spin around from one to the other all year and actually never move forward. And so having a very clear North Star and then being able to battle test that North Star every time a new trend comes in, every time we get new info, really have conviction in what we're building, and then being able to relay that on to the other team members. So almost I become obsolete in the day-to-day building of the game, and so that was a big goal of mine. And unfortunately, I can say I'm somewhat obsolete in the day-to-day building of Fableborn. We've got some incredible people that make some great decisions for the studio, for our community, and for the game itself. And now it's really about marrying up the team that we have, the goal that we want to achieve, and then are we set up for success? And so everything in between is, do we have the right funding? Do we have the right distribution? Do we have the right knowledge? Is there gaps in our knowledge? Are there opportunities in the market that actually really make sense for the goals that we have, and we should take that opportunity? If we do we have a team to take that opportunity? And if we don't, can we create a team? Do we have the resources to do that? And so that's where I'd say a lot of my time at the intersection of strategy and execution.
Nice. So how did you manage to attract that top people, top talent, and retain them without necessarily having the same resources as like the biggest on the market?
Yeah, I mean, similar for myself. I came from a Japanese gaming company, 5,000 people, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue every
Very
quarter.
different workflow.
Yeah, and so it's a very different space, but also the value that you think you provide uh, is insignificant compared to the value that you feel you provide when you're in a six-person studio. And so you're wearing so many hats, you're contributing into areas that maybe you'd never contribute in that 5,000 person team.
For
You
sure.
have a very specific role. You're a specialist in that role. You do that role extremely well, and it's valuable to the company and the organization. But what we realized is there's so many talented individuals that had come to that point where they'd had success, they led success, and now they're really thinking about, well, I don't feel like I'm adding value, and the
Hmm.
decisions I'm able to make are really small and in a very niche part of the organization or the product or the sector that I work in. And those people wanted to get back on the ground, not have layers of hierarchy, not have this huge chain of command where conversations had to be had before you can make decisions. And obviously, that's where startups thrive, right? There's
Hmm.
less red tape. You see a problem or you see an opportunity, you spend 30 minutes, an hour, however long you need to discuss it, and you make a decision, sometimes there and then. And so the feedback loops are much faster. You are a lot more autonomous. You're given a lot more freedom, and therefore you can really impact the business. Not just your role or your team, but the entire organization. And so being able to find the right people that are excited and looking for that opportunity, and then being able to share our vision, and sometimes our vision wasn't exciting for others and they had different goals. And others actually were really excited about what we wanted to build. They had success in the past and they wanted to now repeat that success yet again, but with a different set of challenges. And so that's, I'd say, where we were best positioned. It helps that we've already got a very strong leadership team, that gives confidence that this team has the potential to execute,
Yeah,
and now they've got the opportunity to execute, and I want to jump on board as well.
exactly. It feels to me like very much like, and that's something that we've talked about with several guests on the show before. There is the community side, which is the user base and the people that are interacting with whatever the service or product it is that you're building. But there is also the internal community, and the ideal scenario is that they're both aligned, like the same values flows from the core team into the community. It's something that we're trying to do. Extremely difficult. It feels to me like uh, you're managing the internal community of Fableborn in a way that's exciting. That's I think the best word that I have for it, for people that are inside the team, at least from what I've heard. How do you approach it? Like, how do you keep it for external communities, not necessarily external, but for the user base and what we refer to as the community? Um, the way that we're going about it is we're trying to just have an extension of the core team and act the way that we are acting internally, also in the community itself, in order to create that continuity. I think I said it right. How do you approach it from Fable?
Yeah, I'd say now, the last few months, it seems like everything's gone extremely well, and so many are talking about Fableborn, and generally the consensus is, overwhelmingly positive. But we have to remember that we were building our community for 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And, I remember being in some of our Discord AMAs and there'd be 12 people that show up,
We've been
and
there.
two of the people are on stage. And so we didn't start out like we are now, where, everyone is talking about Fableborn. When we thought about initially at that time, and bear in mind, Fableborn was, much early in development, so it was very just coming out of prototype stage. There was a lot still to iterate on and still to validate.
Mm-hmm.
And when we thought about it, about community building, we initially thought about what are the type of users we want in our community right now. Not exclusively, but right now, for this point in time and the next X amount of months in our journey in development with Fableborn, what are the types of users that we wanted? And bear in mind, this is now, early 2022.
Mm-hmm.
And so the market is peak frothiness. there's a lot of opportunity when it comes to value accrual and value extraction. But we also see that, that as a motivation wasn't sustainable. And so once that motivation stops being served, like for any player, any community, any user, once that motivation stops being served, that community starts to dwindle and that user, goes to the next opportunity or the next community that they feel aligned with. And so we knew, well, we're not providing any financial value, right? We're still building Fableborn. We're not going to launch a token. We're not going to launch our 10K NFT collection. And so what is the central point, the consistent point that's always going to be there? And that was our product, our game. And so we made it very clear that what we're going to focus on is the product to lead our marketing, to lead our community. And so we focused on playtest, game nights, showcasing more about our vision, what we think about Web3, why we believe we can create something really sustainable but scalable in Web3. And like I say, when there's a lot of noise, and the market, I'd say, was somewhat still maturing. It's still maturing now, but
Yeah,
I'd
for
say,
sure.
it was really immature in the last
Back then,
cycle.
yeah.
Yeah, and so when there's a lot of noise, you don't get the same attention. But also, we didn't have the product to be able to really show and validate all this vision. Although internally we were playing and prototyping and testing Fableborn, no one had really seen it, had played it, had looked at videos because it didn't exist. And so that's what we focused on creating, that rabbit trail of information, so you could decide for yourself: is this a team, a vision, and a concept that I'm excited about? And if you're not, and actually in 2022, there's a lot of players that weren't, because why would you when I could make $10,000 on this NFT by flipping over the next 48 hours? Very different value prop. And so what we focus on is, and what we were fortunate to really receive is real super fans. There's the person that actually came on top of a leaderboard in our playtest last month was with us in 2022.
Nice. That's amazing.
And so those types of users that come and discover you, and they generally like those three things that I mentioned, they've stuck around and they've then bought our NFT. They've participated in all of our playtests and our recent play to airdrop. They also provide a huge amount of value add when it comes to feedback, to addressing how we can do things better, what they want to see in the community. So they're real value add. They're really participating. And that's what we wanted to find. We were more focused on finding the first 100, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 super fans, rather than 50,000 users that were all excited about next month's airdrop or NFT launch and then would all disappear. And we've seen, and I'm part of many Discord servers that are like that have 150,000 users, but have only had 10 messages in the last week.
Yep.
And so we really, like I say, focused on narrowing down what's the type of user we want first and foremost, and then providing them with the content that hopefully excites them, and that led to really strong core audience and user base that is still with us.
That makes a lot of sense. Now Fableborn is in a different stage, and you're pulling also maybe the type of people that are looking to just go by, maybe flip an airdrop and go away. How do you handle the new audience that are now coming by? And I think even more importantly, how does the OGs, like the super fans, are handling like them coming in now?
Yeah, so luckily it's not binary. It's not suddenly just turned on. We've slowly got to this point over the last 2.5 years and started to showcase more about what is Web3 about Fableborn, what's our vision now when it comes to using blockchain tech how would an NFT or a token, for example, work within Fableborn? And what are those ideas? What's that vision for the game? And that has attracted, like you say, a new audience as we start to talk about these different things. But what it's always centered around is how does this enable our audience, our players, our community, our game? We've never and still don't create content that is just purely focused on value extraction. Now, there's potential for value accrual, but not everyone is going to have that opportunity. And we showcased that in the last two play to airdrop campaigns. We had the first one, 77,000 players, but only 10,000 players were being rewarded. So 67,000 players didn't get, quote unquote, any reward. And then the second playtest that just ended a week ago now, or just over a week now, that had over 100,000 players. And so less than 10% of players received a quote unquote a reward. Yet if you have a look at the overall sentiment of Fableborn, it's just overwhelmingly positive, right? And that's because I believe we've always stayed true to that narrative that the game will be center stage. And now there's these interesting facets around. We've now got an NFT collection. We're releasing and have run a play to airdrop campaign. What does that mean for the future? We've got all these interesting verticals, but they all stem back to Fableborn, the game. And thankfully, I also think, the market has matured. I'd also say that somewhat there's some despondency in the space. There's been lots of rug pulls. There have been lots of games that have been extremely hyped. There's been tokens that have launched at billions of dollars of FDV, only to drop 90% within,
Sometimes
3
even
weeks,
more.
4 weeks, sometimes even less. And so there's been users that have looked at those games thinking, well, they've got millions of followers. Their Discord has 200,000 users and their Twitter has 700,000 followers. And so, of course, I'm excited about the game. But then the games don't live up to those KPIs, let's say. And the production value isn't there. And so, unfortunately, those players that are looking for, exponential value accrual, that opportunity doesn't exist. And now they're starting to learn that, or in my opinion, I'm seeing more of an appetite for strong teams with a strong product and backing those teams because it's not going to be, a peak and trough within 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It's going to be a longer cook, let's say, and one that is potentially reaching heights that those other games and teams haven't been able to, but importantly, reaching those heights and being able to sustain and scale. And when we talk about our vision of Fableborn, we're able to back that up. The product has always been the center point of our marketing, as I've mentioned a few times already. And so when everyone was able to play Fableborn for the first time, it was our first open play test 2 months ago. That's why we had thousands of videos organically posted. It's why without zero marketing, we were able to attract 77,000
People
real
were
players.
very interested to see. Yeah, people were very interested to see how it looks like.
And so I believe that's because we've built a really strong game, a really high production value core loop. We're able to articulate our vision, and then the product that we've put out reiterates that vision. It's not a false promise. We've delivered on what we said we're going to do to the standard that we said we're going to do it in, and in the time frame that we said we're going to do it in. And I think trust is, a really important part of Web3 and your community. And so, yeah, I'd say all of those things adding up together has resulted in, where we are now.
Very interesting. You mentioned something regarding pretty much let's call it the peak of the bull, little over 2 years ago now. You had, I would say, all the ingredients to to pretty much raise whatever amount
Yeah.
you would have liked, I believe, but just because the pedigree of the team, the idea, and just the state of the market. Why didn't you?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and we consciously and intentionally sat out last cycle, and even though, like you say, there's a lot of opportunity, we could have raised a lot more than we raised. We
Any
made
PFP,
fundraising,
any
we
10K
we made
collection.
fundraising very difficult for ourselves, and so we could have raised a lot more. We could have launched a PFP collection and raised again several $1 million.
Easily in minutes,
What
pretty much.
what we didn't want to do, however, because prior to Failborn, some may not know, we killed 5 games. And so, like I say, our goal is a top 100 game. That's what we've built in the past, not just myself, but the entire leadership team. That's our goal now. And if we're not spending our runway and don't have a confidence that what we're building is going to be a top 100 game, we kill it. And of course, as a startup, we want to get to that conclusion as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's taken us a few weeks, sometimes a few months. But when we don't see that conviction, both qualitatively and quantitatively, we kill the game. And so what we didn't want to do at that point, we still hadn't settled that Fableborn was the game. We hadn't received those KPIs that this is a core loop that's going to be really sticky, that's going to engage and has a position in the market. We were internally bullish, but we hadn't validated that.
How
And
do
so
you validate it?
early on, what we do is we run a small test with maybe 5 to 7,000 players,
Okay.
not with our community, but acquiring players that have no brand affinity with Fableborn. They
Okay.
don't know who Pixion Game is. They don't know who Fableborn is. They really, their actions tell you what they think of your
Yeah.
game. If it's good, they stick. If they don't, they'll uninstall within the first 5 minutes.
Interesting.
And so that gives us a good health check. There's no false positives here. If the game is good, players will continue to play day after day after day.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't see some of those KPIs early on, even without, polished art, progression layer, the PvP, even if that's not in, we should be able to, see strong day 1, day 3 retention.
Mm-hmm.
Daily playtime should be at least or close to an hour. The number of raids per day should be in double digits. That was the KPIs that we were focused on. Unfortunately, with Fableborn, we did, and we hit those KPIs. But like I say, we only discovered that towards the end of 2022. And so what we didn't want to do is launch a 10K PFP collection, have 10,000 stakeholders that we've told, okay, this is the game we're going to build and scale
Mm-hmm.
and launch, when internally we still hadn't had that conviction. And there's a
Yeah.
real possibility, given our track record, we'd killed 5 games. We'll
You
kill
might
another
kill
one.
another. Yeah.
Yeah. And what we believed is that it would really create misalignment between those 10K holders and what's best for the studio, even short to long term, right? Across that entire spectrum. And I wanted the team to be able to really make those decisions quickly. And if we had a token and we promised investors that we're going to
Yeah.
launch token, or we promised 10,000 users that this is the game that we're going to build that's going to help you accrue value in whatever sense to this NFT collection, it'd really hamper our ability to be logical and say this game is not the top 100 game,
Yeah.
let's kill it, right? But we're now taking into account lots of external factors, and so really wanted to not have the team have to go through that decision-making process and really focus and really dial in on, like I say, do we have a top 100 game or not?
Interesting. So how do you kill 5 games? Like that's ruthless. That's really ruthless. Like I'm trying to understand from a community perspective, both internal and external. I'm not sure how in the know the community were about those 5 games being killed. in earlier stages, but what was the reaction, both internally and externally?
So we didn't actually have a community. We didn't start building a community until we had done that test with
So you were
Fableborn.
in stealth, pretty much?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah. And for the same reason, again, it becomes very
Yeah,
difficult. And particularly if we're
to get attention.
building and killing games, community members come in and say, well, I really loved concept three, but now it's
Yeah,
dead.
yeah.
Right. And so you've already got a graveyard of games and potentially community members that liked one of the concepts.
And
And
now
that
angry.
creates now
Yeah,
comparison theory on how they objectively look at Fableborn or your next
yeah,
concept. And so we only wanted to spend the time and resources as well. Building a really loyal and strong community is a lot of effort, but importantly, it needs to be consistent. And so you can't make an announcement, have an NFT collection, do one playtest, then suddenly go dark for 4 months until the next
yeah.
milestone. You
That
have to be
shatters
really
trust.
consistent. And so we knew, again, we could only be really consistent when we knew what we were going to be building, what we're going to be shipping and launching. And so only when we found that with Fableborn did we start to build the community. And so to answer your question, how do we kill games? Literally have a set of goals before we start building, and we set those goals before we start building so we don't ourselves get emotional about
Hmm.
the games or start to
It's a difficult one.
rationalize in our mind, actually maybe we can try one more build, or maybe we
Yeah,
can make this tweak and it would work and it would change significantly what we're seeing. We have to be, as a startup, capital efficient. And so setting those KPIs beforehand, all agreeing this is what we want to achieve. If we don't achieve it, we kill. It doesn't matter what we see in the data, we kill it. And so that's what we did. We did hit those KPIs for the first 5 games we did with Fableborn, and that's why we are where we are.
yeah. I think that correlates very well to where you are now, because I think being that ruthless and being so focused on what you're trying to achieve, and not really try to maybe have an idea that you liked or that was okay, maybe we can find it, and actually like pretty much setting the goals in advance, testing it, and then making a very difficult decision over and over and over and over again. that's that speaks volumes to just how, I would say, dedicated to the cause you guys are, and to your vision, which is very inspiring just from like an operations perspective, I would say.
Yeah, I hope what it does, in a market where, like I say, unfortunately, there's still a lot of bad actors, there's ill intentions.
Hmm.
What I hope the last, not only just the development process of Fableborn, but even what we've done prior, not raising around, not launching an NFT collection, not extracting from the market when clearly we could have 4-5x'd
Hmm.
easily what we raised. I hope what that does is build, even more credibility, but importantly, trust that we're here for the long term. We're not shy about making difficult decisions. As long as we can see and believe that this is going to have a net positive effect long term for what we're building. And so I believe that then makes it much easier for, different types of users to align with us, whether it's the individual that's looking for short, mid, long term value
Hmm.
accrual, whether it's the player that wants to compete, whether it's the player that just likes mobile games or wants to play socially or wants to play competitively. That conviction, and holding true to that conviction, I really hope, in this space, it builds trust for us.
It will be interesting to see, because I think you for sure have the trust of your peers, and not just trust but respect. I would say that's a big one as well. Uh, I'm not sure how it's going to translate to the Web3 gamer persona, like the DGen.
Yeah.
Like I have no idea, but I have heard about you guys from the Game 7 community. So I think that speaks volumes, because we are seeing pretty much maturing of all things, including, let's call it, educational do your own research type of content that is also maturing a little bit, and people are looking a bit deeper into the companies they are quote unquote investing in. So I think in that regard, you for sure should benefit from the actions that you've taken. I want to go back to the Fableborn community. How do you kind of view the role of the Fableborn community in the success of Fableborn, specifically maybe Pixion as a studio? How do you envision the Fableborn community in say 3 years time?
Yeah, I see them as we've seen them from the start, integral, an integral collective voice that helps sanity check and align us on what we're building, but also then providing critical feedback that we've missed on what we're building. And I mentioned earlier that, we were very clear on what type of user do we want to attract to Fableborn early on. And we had 8 playtests last year. Although they were closed or invite only, our core community was always in those playtests. And we made some radical changes last year. Even this year, we made a radical change on the art style. And that also stemmed from, the community members. Some of it from our own knowledge of, being able to scale games. But the community has been integral in sharing feedback on the game. Like I say, sanity checking us with our vision, what our focus is on, even actually providing us with opportunities. They see the market and have a different network. And so being able to almost hive mind our approach to Web3 and showcasing all these different things that are going on in a space that is ever evolving and changing, I only see that becoming solidified. And what I hope Fableborn community in the next few years becomes is this huge collective audience with very different personas and motivations, but all aligned with one central thesis, and that's with the Pixion team to create one of the best mobile games in the space.
Hopefully. Do you think that hive mind mentality is something that is doable in Web 2 as well, or is it something that is more like naturally Web3 because of the nature of like communities and Discord and people are more involved and people are more vocal? Or have you seen that ever before in Web 2?
I've seen it in Web 2, but there's a few things why you don't see it so much in Web 2 mobile. One is teams don't focus on it. Like I say, building a community is expensive, takes a lot of time, resources, and you have to be consistent. Whereas instead, what everyone was focused on and teams were focused on is how do I get installs?
Yeah.
Right? I want installs. And so what I'm going to do is throw those marketing dollars at Facebook and Google and other ad networks, and I'll get those players anyway. Now I'm seeing it a lot more because, like I said earlier, finding those players is much harder.
Yeah.
And so really creating a space and a shared space where your super fans have a much closer conversation and link to the team, I'd say has become a lot more prevalent in Web 2. Of course, in Web 3, everyone is hyper engaged, or there's a large audience that's hyper engaged. They're all what I'd call the early adopters, so they're naturally seeking out new opportunities, new games, new teams.
Yeah, it seems like
my timeline,
tendency.
I think every week I will always see at least one individual post. Here's a new game, here's a new team, here's a new launch, here's some new alpha. And so everyone is naturally seeking out, a place to call their own or to be part of. And so it's, I'd say, easier to attract those users, but still, equally as difficult to retain them and engage them.
Interesting. Okay, that was amazing. I think we're pretty much on time, unfortunately, because I think we can go for at least another hour. Like I have so much more to ask, but we will need to save that for another time. I would like to thank you very much for being here. I think that what you guys are building and the team and the vision, and I'll be honest, just your actions, like most frankly, because you have put your money where your mouth is, or kind of didn't took the money when, when you had the chance to, and I think that speaks volumes, and I'm very much cheering for you from the sidelines. And I think this conversation was very helpful for me, first and foremost, to understand this space better, because I am lacking in understanding specifically of mobile. So that was very helpful for me, and I'm sure to our listeners as well. So again, I want to really thank you for taking the time and being here.
No, appreciate the invite. Really, really excited about what you guys are building, but the space, like I say, maturing. So great to be here. Appreciate the time.
Nice. As always, please make sure to subscribe, share, like, all of that good stuff. I'll have Cam's socials and obviously all the Fableborn socials in the description below, so feel free to check them out. Also, you can check them out in the Game 7 portal. And yeah, I'll catch you on the next one. Thank you very much.